right. And on our next presentation is Frank Dempsey, and the first of the two will be on Frank's stray light shields, followed by Mercury salt glaciers. Frank?
Okay, thanks, Tom. So the idea here is to make a stray light shield that allows us to block some light when we try to do some deep sky viewing. So the pictures here on the opening slide show some examples of lights that are pestering us when we try to do some observing. So you find a lot of pesky lights that aren't shielded very well, despite the past 20 years of improvements of light shielding. And as far as cars go, my experience is you can't go any place that you can go to try to set up your telescope for dark sky viewing. If you can drive there, so can other vehicles too, and they will. So you may be bothered by headlights. So it's a nuisance. So I built a little shield that you might find interesting, but I suggested it to Paul when he asked for any subjects. So he said, sure, go ahead and do it. I'll just mention a few. I threw this together yesterday, just as a few supporting documents to show why it's important, in case some people are not aware that dark sky viewing requires light adaptation by the eye. And so I just put in one example. I pulled out a log sheet showing a fairly tenuous view deep sky object. May not look like much, you may not even see it there, but some deep sky objects are pretty darn faint, and all you see is a faint wisp. And that's after you've let your eyes become dark adapted. And so if anybody's curious about why do I even bother building a shield and is it necessary, it is because anybody who wants to do visual deep sky viewing has to do something about the light problem. And so I mentioned a few little details that give some more supporting information in case anybody's not really aware of some details. And I guess a lot of people nowadays are not aware, because I'll see a lot of people doing, we do a lot of public outreach at Pickering, and people I see drive into dark sky viewing sites, and a lot of them are not even aware that people are trying to maintain dark adaptation, and they just drive in with bright headlights on, and their idea might be to get out and take a cell phone picture of whatever you're looking at through a telescope. But it's worthwhile to point out that some details here that to get dark adaptive vision, we need to let our eyes adapt to very low light levels for nearly half an hour. And that happens because some pigments in the retina change as we lower the light illumination. So as we look at darker and darker subjects, we turn off the lights and see the dark sky around us and the dark ground, hopefully no snow on it. Our eyes adapt to lower and lower illumination levels. And retina, one of the photopigments in the retina builds up. And cones and rods are in the eye cells, and cones detect color, and they start to lose sensitivity after light drops a certain amount. As Charles mentioned, referred to the loss of color vision in the dark sky. And after our cones start to lose vision, the rods around the outside of the eye, perimeter of the eye, start to take over, and they detect a lot of the light. So the graph here is a typical one that you might find for dark adaptation, and it just shows that as time goes on, you see about half an hour on the horizontal axis, human subjects being tested for their lowest light they can detect lower and lower illumination levels. And the sky, the vertical axis is logarithmic, so don't get fooled by, you see 6 and then you see a 3 after half an hour, and it looks like maybe they can see twice as well, but it's logarithmic. So actually your eyes can improve sensitivity by a range of thousands over this period of 20 to 30 minutes. So the point is that we want our eyes to dark adapt, and it takes about 20 to 30 minutes. And any exposure to white light rapidly builds up the pigments in the retina that cause the cones to start detecting light, and we have to start all over again. So that means if you're at a dark sky site and the vehicle drives in with bright headlights on, and your eyes are shot even for a few seconds, it takes a lot of time to recover that dark adaptation. So some people are not aware of that. That's my impression from a lot of public outreach, where people just turn on their cell phones and want to take a picture of whatever you're looking at through the telescope. So cell phones, I could mention some other problems too. That I mentioned that any place you can drive, so can other people, and you will drive in with headlights on. But I've seen a silly trend going on at places like Starfest the past 10 years or so, where we can be under a really dark sky and people pull out a cell phone and look out and look at a bright glaring screen while there's a beautiful sky above them. And you see a lot of laptops now, so you try to do some dark sky viewing, and some people have laptops putting out a lot of light, a lot of blue light. Did I mention that red light is the wavelengths that our eyes are least sensitive to? So in the dark, we want to use red lights as much as possible because they affect our dark adapted eyes much less than the blue or yellow or green wavelengths. So we want to use red light. So we see people pulling out cell phones with blue screens and glaring into the sky and glaring at their own eyes, and they don't seem to care or know. Fine, fine. Because if we want to do some deep sky observing and use dark adaptation, I want to set up a shield to block it. So I'm not going to get too upset anymore. We're years and decades past that stage of yelling at somebody to turn off the light, because nowadays cars, even if you have a car and you want to turn off the lights, a lot of cars you can't do that. You park the car and you turn it off and walk away from it. The headlights stay on for a while, and some people, even if they open the door of the car, the lights come on. So it's quite a nuisance, can be. I've seen people who are quite conscientious about this problem, and they've tampered with the software in the vehicle to minimize the amount of time that the lights stay on after they open or close the door. So some people are quite conscious of it. However, the problem is not zero. You can't get rid of the problem. So my solution has been to make a shield. And I started a few years ago or more, and I built a fairly big, clumsy shield made out of 3 big panels that were 4 feet wide and put a tarp over it. It worked fairly well. But with a small car loaded right to the hilt with telescope gear, I look for smaller and smaller solutions. So I just put an example here showing, I know Andy mentioned some deep sky observing certificates you can do. And that one on the left, Deep Sky Gems, that's from the RASC Observer's Handbook, in case you don't recognize it. A lot of scribbling because some I've done and some I haven't. I just took an image of one sheet from my logbook. The one on the right, that looks like the Astronomical League's Dark Nebula Observing Program. Just some examples. If you try to observe dark nebula or deep sky gems that are pretty faint, you need dark adaptive vision. You can't do it without it. I showed you a sketch that I made at the beginning of a fairly tenuous, faint object, and I wouldn't be able to see it without dark adaptive vision. So it takes a lot of time to get to that stage. And actually, deep sky observing, I'd have to say, is quite a laborious task if you really want to do that, because it means you've got to drive a long way, set up some equipment, spend several hours, and get maybe a few objects ticked off on the list at most. I have to say, probably the worst or most challenging object might have been the Horsehead Nebula, which I heard decades ago was a photographic object only, until I got an H beta filter and looked for it in a very, very dark sky, and I realized, yes, the Horsehead Nebula is visible, but it's the sort of thing used in that example. Can look right at the object where it is, and it's a shadow in a dark nebula. That's what the Horsehead Nebula is, and so can look right at it, and requires deep sky observing. In some cases, requires putting a shroud around my head over the eyepiece. I use a big black T-shirt so it covers my eyes, and even things like the ground illumination by the starlight can be too bright. One of the scopes I use is pretty good for deep sky observing, but it's an ancient Meade 10-inch f4 Schmidt Cassegrain. It's not a Schmidt Cassegrain. It's got a corrector plate on the front, but the problem is it has a white colored tube. So when I look at the eyepiece and the focuser, there's white around it. So I have to cover the white with darker shield, because even that is too much light. So I'm talking about really dark conditions it takes to observe some objects. So that's all motivation I wanted to illustrate. So so I put in a few slides to give you some idea here, but I thought best way to illustrate this is to show you how many seconds it takes, possibly 30 seconds to set this up, and it's far easier to illustrate it. So I pulled out a tripod. The first one I used, I think it's in the top left, there was some old camera tripod I had lying around, and fine, worked pretty well. I used a C-clamp on it, but I built a few more because I thought, this is so good, such an improvement over the other system I had. I'm going to build 2 more. I actually built the second one, and I thought, it'd be really ideal if I built 3 of them. And so setting up a tripod like this one, I got pretty spiffy, but I'm not going to set up all the way because it's I don't need it high enough to obstruct my view here, but I'll just open it up part way just for illustration. And you can probably see that the size of this package, got 3 of them now. It's easy to throw 3 of these little bundles into the car and stick clamps onto it pretty quickly. This takes so long to set up. I can do it in the dark, blindfolded pretty well. And so it would be ideal to have a dark tarp over it. However, plastic garbage bags do a pretty good job. And these are just metal plates, so put one here and let's get that one approximately level. It doesn't need to be level. One needs to go here, one can go here. And as I said, I can do it blindfolded in the dark. And so this is not exactly what you call a high-tech object. And I guess following on from Charles's presentation, no batteries required. Okay. And so it's done. And so the tripod is not fully extended; it can go a little bit higher, and I can crank it up to a bit higher. But the point is that I think you see in the image on the slide on the lower right, that's one of my scopes. That looks like my 5-inch Mac cast. So it's a handy little telescope, and so I can put the telescope higher for my use with my large Newtonians, or I can put it lower. So one key feature I've decided that the garbage bags are really good for is it's relatively easy to handle in the wind, because there's rarely wind at night, but there can be wind at night. But I don't worry about it, because if the wind wants to blow, you go ahead and blow. And the way wind often works at night is relatively calm, and you figure it's pretty nice, but get the odd little gust of wind. So if a gust wants to blow it, fine, who cares? It's only a few seconds that it's possibly not blocking some light. But and if you need thicker blocking material, so far I've found this to be pretty good. It's really easy to put 2 garbage bags here instead of 1. But really, that's all I wanted to illustrate. And you see what a relatively quick solution that is to set up or take down. And that's really what I wanted to illustrate. And I just put in the slides for some background information that may give you some idea why I find it worthwhile. I mentioned I have 3 of these. I brought one. I think I had one final slide to illustrate, and that is the fact that the tripod I started off with originally was fine. One in the top of a view there that was an older slide I used for another presentation. It was fine. I just had a few clamp on it. Put this out of the way. And the amount of time it takes to pack this away is almost 20. A scrap plastic bag does a pretty good job. The tripod, I was going to mention the tripod. So I started off with a camera tripod I had lying around, and then decided I should get another one and then a third one. So I realized maybe look online and see. Yes, there are some good ones. There it is. There, the one that I ended up getting. They might call it heavy duty or something. Do they call it heavy duty? Heavy duty tall camera. Okay, I think this is strong enough. Couldn't handle anything more than a cell phone on it. Okay, so I wouldn't trust this to hold more than a cell phone without shaking or vibrating. But they call it heavy duty. So that's fine. But it's heavy duty and does a good job for my application, and it's really really easy to pack away in the dark, put it away. As I said, no batteries required. Just cost a little bit of magnets are probably the more expensive part after tripod. So that's all I wanted to illustrate. So I'm finished with this talk. Any questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one. Okay.
Any questions from the audience? No? Okay. Questions from online?
Online, Dave Atul says, great idea, love it. Zapfan says, I saw someone on a ladder putting a black trash bag over a streetlight to temporarily improve viewing conditions from his backyard. Hot tip.
Yeah, streetlights are a good point. I should have mentioned it because I just mentioned the idea of lights around this vehicles driving into your dark sky observing setup. I mentioned the problem of people with laptops and cell phones, but one way that this is extremely useful at home is for blocking street lights and local housing lights. So I showed on the opening slide some poor but typical house lights or building lights that cause street light, and even if they're far away, they cause a bit of a light coming into your eye. So that's great for blocking street lights as well as other sources of nuisance light. So yes, good point about the street lights. Anyway, I guess we're
Okay. So,
Charles has a
Charles.
question.
Friend, thank you. Is it on? Thank you for showing us these wonderful solutions. I do have a questions about maybe my challenge is my neighbor has the lights like the building is actually higher than my backyard. The light is actually coming from above, not from the eye level. So have to think about a solution. What is the solution is going to look like when the light is high above?
Yep, good point. How high is the light source? What do you do about it? So I've set this up because it handles stuff at eye level. Eye level or a little bit higher. I showed I put the tripod a bit higher. My suggestion would be I would use a taller tripod. Now, I have an old tripod that I use for my 80mm binoculars, and it goes probably this high, well above my head. So it's pretty tall. You can get some tall tripods. I would even find a way to adapt. What I would suggest, my first guess, I would take this flimsy tripod I showed you. I would clamp a vertical pole onto it and then put this bar up there. That's what I would do as a suggestion, just to block the street light or the neighbor's light. So that's my suggestion. My first guess would be extend this horizontal bar higher. That's what I would do. Anyway, that's my suggestion.
Just following that up, if you're into photography, if you've ever been to a outdoor photo shoot, just like in an indoor lab, they have stands for backdrops, and a photo backdrop. Some of those are like 8 and 10 feet tall. Absolutely no good if you've got any kind of wind, but it would give you good light protection to a high degree. Not a cheap solution though.
No, it's a good point because there's one right behind you. It's a good tall stand. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, actually,
Okay. Yeah, backdrop. Okay, yep.
yeah, actually, do you have a solution for the? Sorry, turn the mic on. Is it on? Okay. Yeah, my homemade solution for the street light is a beach umbrella with a tilting parasol, which will block out the street light and a big chunk of the sky, but give you a pretty wide shadow.
Yep, good point. I'll mention one reason why I titled it Frank's Light Shields is because other people probably have their own solutions. So maybe it'll spark some discussion online or wherever about other people's light shields. So I just wanted to show mine, what I've done. So that's why I've titled it with that wonderful gentleman's name there. So anyway, I guess we're done. Tom, maybe?
Okay. So we'll just switch back to the camera, or just switch back to the telescope while we set up for the last of Frank's presentations.